Hey there, folks. So welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And in a slight departure from my regular schedule, because this will need to be dealt with, we're going to be talking about the sophomore album from AJR, called The Click. So, friendly warning, this review is not going to be safe for work. There will be a lot of profanity and descriptive and frankly disgusting varieties. I'm not quite certain what will qualify for any bots to flag a video like this as age-gated or ad-restricted, but this review will certainly test that limit. If you got an issue with such a bellicose manner, thinks that it undermines any sense of professionalism I might have, I highly recommend you click away now, because the next several paragraphs of this script will probably piss you off a bit. I also recommend that if you're a fan of this band, unless you're into the sort of masochism that involves sounding, you might want to clear out too. Put it mildly, you're not gonna like what I have to say. Now then, I was originally planning this review as something more impromptu, maybe even frame it as a reaction rant, something that would allow you to experience all the oral visceration I suffered when listening through this album. Hell, I was planning it as something as a short, maybe bundle it in with a bunch of other albums so that my venom could be diluted across other listens, a bunch of little short snippets. In truth, probably would have been easier than putting myself through any more listens to this plasticized skull fuck of a record, but wouldn't be as satisfying, not to you guys, especially when I may have taken that step to announce on Twitter that this record easily would take the spot for me as the worst record of the 2010s thus far. And I know some of you, you're thinking, wait, what? What the hell? These guys? An indie pop trio that concocted a precious brand of DIY that fails to disguise the fact that they're all being bankrolled by Warner Brothers and have toured as openers in front of many pop acts that I gotta assume are faintly embarrassed to even be on the same ticket. They can't be that bad, right? Oh, well, that's the thing. AJR are one of those overly polished indie groups like American Authors who became more famous for commercial jingles than actual records. And yet, unlike American Authors, who turned out to be a modest little power pop group away from the spotlight, I've got nothing against that band. AJR could be comfortably described as everything shrill, twee, and insufferable about modern indie music once you dig into that awful fucking debut. And yet, since I'm Ready apparently sold 1 million copies to people with no taste or brain cells to split between them back in 2015, AJR somehow became convinced that they should go bigger, maybe even aim for a concept that they could try to realize through grandiose, arranged instrumentation. And make no mistake, I'm directing a considerable amount of the blame here at Warner Brothers. Aside from being false copyright flagging hacks who for some reason gave these brothers a budget, I blame the bath salts, you can tell that someone pulling the strings was directing a project that didn't just fit for those commercials, but also operated as a perfect tune to swipe all those 21 Pilots and John Bellion fans who thinks those records are their life and are so lit fam and all the rest of the horrible millennial slang those crocodile fuckers think that we use. So, any of the clique or billionaires who are watching and don't hate me enough already for the past couple years of reviews, and I know a whole bunch of you hate me, if you're looking for a fresh target for your pitchforks and torches, I want you to go listen to this album and realize that this is what Warner Brothers thinks that you like. This is what they consider relatable and so deep that you think that. They are literally banking on that shit and that connection for you in concert to buy this record. Now, I'm going to assume that most of you, they're not going to turn off this video and listen to this noxious scrotal discharge, so I'll just assume that you've been offended by something that I've said thus far. I wouldn't be surprised. And then move on to the matter at hand, because at the end of the day, AJR did choose to make the click and give the overstuffed middle management industry hacks another yacht or lump of cocaine. And folks, I'm not kidding about this one. I'm really angrier about this record than I was about Ray Schrimmer, Thomas Rhett, Chris Brown, will.i.am, Lana Del Rey, and Shawn Mendes probably combined. Well, it's because it brings together elements of all this plague dispensers of records into one gigantic, pulsating abomination. The brang idiocy coming from Ray Schrimmer, the genre-refusing naked calculation of Thomas Rhett, the mercenary commercialism of will.i.am, the pretentious and horrendously framed melodrama of Lana Del Rey, the noxiously awful production of a modern Chris Brown album, to say nothing of the auto-tune assisted falsetto that will drive dogs to run off of bridges, and from Shawn Mendes, the feeling of deep-seated disappointment that maybe this band could have potentially created something that might have had presence or power. There was a seed of an idea that could have worked here. But you know what? Lisa Ray Shermer has Black Beatles. Lana Del Rey might actually release a good album in a few weeks. I'm actually kind of looking forward to covering it. will.i.am's got I Got a Feeling and a couple other decent Black Eyed Peas songs. Chris Brown has to live with being Chris Brown, and frankly, that seed of guilt is somewhere in his mind. That's enough for me. Shawn Mendes has the eventual realization that working with Teddy Geiger will ruin his long-term career, so I'm hoping that split happens. And Thomas Rhett, he's got that Ed Sheeran ripoff and working once with Maren Morris. I don't see anything all that redemptive about AJR. Even a collaboration with Rivers Cuomo that reminds me of Weezer's mid-2000s work in the worst way possible. And even then, Rivers Cuomo and Weezer, they at least had enough self-awareness to dive headfirst into irony. You can at least kind of find an in-route to enjoy those mid-period records. But here's the thing. After I finished listening to this, I thought it had to be a spoof, a parody of awful, overblown indie pop music, a sanitized pastiche for younger audiences, the off-brand TV pilot version of some product Disney outsourced to a Vine flameout. But no, what's so fucking terrifying is that somebody greenlit this project and the writing behind it. From interviews, the band seems to actually back it up. I've read Season 5 Glee fanfic with more engaging and fleshed out character and dramatic stakes. And say what you will about all of Glee's Technicolor train wreck, especially that season, you at least have to give the feeling that Ryan Murphy had some vestige of creative vision or a sense of wit to anchor the character derailment or nonsensical motivation. AJR, meanwhile, they want to ground their emotional drama in a mingled ripoff of Blurry Face and the Human Condition, but the emotional intelligence of a Lucas Graham demo and B-side. But that's not even adequate to describe what a total clusterfuck the emotional through line of this album is. None of it played with any subtlety or deeper pathos or darkness or a sense that any of the brothers had experienced any of the non-existent drama that they're trying to sell. It's actually a little bit alarming how any form of the graduate sophomore crisis is flimsily articulated and then demanded of the audience to feel sorry for them and to relate to the sort of transparent self-deprecation that's just as smug as, well, your average Ryan Murphy character. Because this isn't a case where the band feels like their artistic integrity is compromised by success, or that there's any sort of pleasure to compromise. And even if it was, the fact that they were allowed to do everything they did on this project proves that that would be a complete lie. No. This is simpler. More were the choices between popularity and following one's own personal artistic drive. Okay, you know what? On the broadest possible level, if you strip away all the nuance, this is an analogous through line to an album like Blurry Face. You could see some artistic parallels if you kind of squint for them. Problem is that immediately that thematic cohesion goes out the window from track to track, because it doesn't so much engage with this choice so much as it tries to provide itself excuses and justifications for not making any choice. In other words, if we're gonna get all philosophical about this, it's the very definition of acting in bad faith. Take the good part, the song, where he's wondering if he could just skip past any sort of decision or choice at all and just get to the success or the fulfillment. Problem is that not only does it make you look like a whiny, entitled little twit, it's got none of the self-awareness to acknowledge that engaging with the problem is what is gonna make us fucking care. And furthermore, it's what makes actual dramatic art with pathos. And Weak has got a similar problem. It's asking us to preemptively justify a non-choice or a wrong choice. He's asking us to celebrate it. This is the guy who gets the participation ribbon and is trying to celebrate him as if he won. And he completely guts any sense of tension in the main conflict when you know he's willing to do this. And you know, there is a part of melodrama that can justify making stupid or witless decisions for the wrong reasons and then watching the fallout play out in glorious fashion. But without any sense that AJR is going to face consequences, I'm sorry, nothing to anchor any of that. And thus, when this album tries to get us to engage with AJR's problems, or really non-problems, it feels privileged and myopic in the extreme. The sort of early 20s fuckwits where if they whine to mommy and daddy that they got a hangnail, they'll get the keys to another fucking Ferrari. So when you get a song like Drama, where they're so whining how everybody seems so fake and playing up their problems and all your friends are just so loud, and then you, without any irony or self-reflection, include yourself in loving it too, it becomes a self-perpetuating loop. An Ouroboros of bullshit and shitty people that reminds me of Drama Alert and Keemstar. You know what? Wait, I'll take that back. Keemstar actually had balls, whereas this record is so damn diluted that on the very next song, he's wondering why the love he has for some anonymous figure doesn't feel right. Or to quote him, I grew up on Disney, but this don't feel like Disney. And yeah, the writing across this record is all skin-crawlingly atrocious in that vein, but that's not even relevant at this point. They're about my age, and yet Disney was subverting and twisting their own love stories as early as the Disney Renaissance. No. What this song really reads like is so fucking disingenuous that it makes me want to throw something screaming from a small skyscraper, planting the implication that he wants this person to stick around, but he's gonna change because love is not really feeling right, and she shouldn't grow up before he does, of course. But wait, it actually gets worse, because then we got No Grass Today, which of course is about weed, but then comes to no real conclusion or statement about it at all, and wants to be celebrated with a big sing-along chorus for it. On the hook, he's saying he didn't smoke, he has to perform, so why interfere? Where the key word is so, but it should be but. And then in later verses, he sees people wanting to fight to legalize weed, but he says it's no concern to him. So doesn't that fly directly in the face of his own hook and try to be that big sing-along anthem? Or take a few songs later where we have Call My Dad, or in between the hooks where he's lonely and he wants to go home, he's trying to call about he's all grown up because he looks like he fucking tucked his shirt in, or how he still managed to see so many bras, or he found a place to crash but he forgot his retainer. Seriously, how old is this guy? 10 and a half? Or take Netflix Trip, where the band steals a melody from John Bellion and spends the song tying various moments of his life to seasons of the American version of The Office. Seriously. And in the final verse, he tries to assert that he's bound up so much of his life in The Office that we should then validate these decisions, even despite one of those real-life moments that he's trying to tie together being his grandmother dying. But that song actually highlights a line that does deserve some attention. It's on the hook. Who am I to tell me who I am? Yeah, you heard that right. A guy who is trying to be so self-deprecating and so detached that he refuses to acknowledge his own role in defining himself. And it's not even just there. I'm Not Famous is a cheery, upbeat song about nobody knowing who he is, and now he has no haters. Another track that seems intentionally neutering the drama of any sort of decision, and make no mistake, by the end of this review, you will have haters for so many reasons. And then you get the utterly noxious 3:30, where he nakedly contradicts himself by noting that he's helpless without attention, and that wealthy people learned their lesson to never donate without the press there. Oh wow, putting aside how noxiously offensive that is, in other words, more evidence of these guys wanting validation for acting like privileged shitlords. And then the saying, so I'm thinking rappers, they got it so easy. And yeah, I get that they're trying to say that if they rapped, they could probably say more faster, which I don't get why they just don't do it. It wouldn't be that uncommon in this particular sound. But between that and the interview where they describe drama as having a Kendrick Lamar style beat, they act as though they've never even heard hip hop, but want to appropriate the style and buzzwords for more flimsy artistic justification. And speaking of hollow branding, then we have Bud Like You, where the band goes to a party where everyone hates the same things, because that's what you want to hear at a party. The girl who's hosting apparently doesn't want to be there. These guys don't know how or why a disco ball works, and yet it's all anchored in that they've got a Bud Like You. Might as well be a commercial jingle for Bud Light Lime, except if it ever was presented to a marketing director, he'd make everybody in the corporate office commit seppuku. But then again, let's circle back to that central question between going mainstream and following their own artistic path. The click in their ear versus the clicks that they want to get. Is there an answer? Is there even an attempt to engage with the question? If anything, it sounds like AJR would rather never answer the question and then ask you to validate that attention-seeking non-answer. An album that will detach itself so fully from any vestige of reality or self-determination and then ask you to look and then celebrate them doing it, even though they don't want to be famous. Yeah, sure, buddy. Anyway, here's the infuriating part. That's the text of this album. That's the words that's being presented. That's the subtext. And if you know what, if you had the right singer, you could conceivably anchor that whole detached I'm smarter than you routine. Maybe Alex Turner of the Arctic Monkeys, or the guys from Sparks, or an artist who could lay on the sarcasm vocally pretty heavily like Josh Tillman of Father John Misty, or Mark Kozlik of Sun Kill Moon, or maybe even somebody who was so disconnected from reality that it could be justified in a weird twisted way, like Beck on one of his more warped records. What could be an utterly insufferable listen, but I would get it. Two problems with that though. The first being is that the writing of this record is unbelievably basic. There's no attempt at deeper metaphors or insight or really witty turns of phrase to highlight added intelligence. And the second part, yeah, the delivery. And yeah, we're only now getting to the actual music on this album. And make no mistake, it's just as much of a loopless gangbang as the writing is. And it starts off with the vocal delivery and a lot of the framing. There's nothing to redeem or add subtext to this record, because when these songs are performed, there's not a shred of deeper poignancy and consideration in that delivery. Something that would imply the singer understands some of the asinine implications of what he's saying and might be trying to subvert them or play them so over the top they might become parody. I'd say the straightforward sincerity would imply some parody, but again, there's nothing in the text that supports such an interpretation. And what's worse is how there's no real dimension to delivery here either. All the plasticity of a made-for-TV Disney movie, but somehow even less range. At least Lucas Graham had some vocal idiosyncrasies, and Tyler Joseph and John Bellion, they showed a deeper underlying melancholy that could anchor a lot of their belting. But here, yeah, there's passion, sure, but it's badly misplaced and most often propped up with more auto-tune caterwauling than anyone wants or needs. Like Andy Grammer, but somehow without the grit. And he can try to get a little bit more subtle. Call My Dad is a sort of auto-tuned a cappella ballad for which Imogen Heap should probably sue. But what nearly always ruins it is the multi-track backing vocals, which fall somewhere between trained frontman Pat Monahan on his most punchable, Several Dying Cats, and a bad crooner on pain medication and Drano trying to sound like all of the child choir. And when you include that spine-tingling sound, coupled between pitch shifting and chipmunk vocals as if this record wasn't dick-shreddingly gross enough, you have a vocal performance that is direly convinced of the importance of the event in all these lyrics, but having no sense of the proper emotion to include with it. And then there is the production. And on first glimpse, you know what, you could be forgiven for at least saying that AJR has some vestige of a unique sound, a fusion of piano bar doo-wop, soul, trap, dubstep, and even some elements of drinking songs and folk songs. And if that kind of made you retch at the pit of your stomach at the presence of a mono-genre clusterfuck, that's before I tell you that you can't hear a bass guitar on this record to save your life. That's right, the only thing that we get that's even close to a groove is the stiff, programmed, badly blended percussion that's got no significant low end, and yet for some reason splits apart all the grandiose horns and strings in order to fill up some sort of stomping rhythm. And what blows my mind is that the horn fidelity, it's not even consistent. For some reason, 330 uses these breathy flutes and fake horns that sound like a prolapsed anus, and the contrast between the rest of the record is jarring. This is where you get into the composition. Nearly all these songs have the structure of building up to a chorus and then you would expect the drop, as you will in most generic modern pop songs. But half the time the drop doesn't even happen, leaving all the build-up leading up to nothing. And the other half, you wish the drop and everything else in the immediate vicinity had never happened either. I've already talked about on Billboard Breakdown about perhaps the weakest possible pitch shifting and key change in the week, but let me put it like this. There is an auto-tuned, scratching, scat breakdown on the song No Grass Today that honestly makes me think that Noah Cyrus's Make Me Cry makes that sound good. And against all of it, there's no texture, there's no production blending, or to feel like any of these instruments were recorded in the same country, let alone the same room, and with no adequate mix step to let the sounds grow or swell. All the bombast sounds painfully forced. And look, I get it, it's bedroom production, that sort of thing happens, but both Frank Music and Bleachers record in confined spaces, and they gave their songs the weight and dramatic swell this record seems to want, but has no idea how to properly attain. The most I can praise here is the guitars on Sober Up and Bud Like You, but in the former case, they take a backseat to the cello, which completely makes sense for a song with Rivers Cuomo on it, and the latter is to make a trap-inspired Irish drinking song that even Ed Sheeran would consider a bad idea. Oh, and one more thing. That scratching, scat-like breakdown, there isn't just one on this record, there's 4, with all the teased vocals, unholy screeches, and you have the sense that it's still not quite weird or discordant enough to fall into more meme territory. Just a triplet of guys trying to replicate the utterly pedestrian formula of the Chainsmokers, and somehow failing. And you know, I could probably go on. Like how on every single song you get at least one flubbed rhyme, which I didn't even think was possible. Or how on 330 it tries to make the assertion that if Ed Sheeran had been writing all their songs for them, he'd make them hits. Which given the quality of everything else on display, I kind of doubt that. Or how none of this garish instrumentation hits with any sort of real edge, and just feels like more like a migraine wrapped up in a suppository. But here's my ultimate point. I have no idea who this is for. Again, you might not have liked 21 Pilots' dalliances with reggae, or John Bellion's attempts more at hip-hop, but they at least knew their way around a groove and a good hook, and production with bite, and a writing that wasn't seeking to blow itself. And I can only imagine the fans of both acts will think that this is too safe to really enjoy. It's probably just a slap in their face. And I get why this record exists. Music executives pushing brazen rip-offs, that's nothing new. But what really sinks in this beyond so bad it's good territory is that there's no real ironic appreciation that I can glean from it. Not even functioning as a decent parody, because that would imply that it has to have some sort of clear target. What it feels like most clearly is utterly mindless. A sort of paper-thin annoyance that only becomes more excruciating with every single nanosecond of thought that you give it. The sort of music that inspires relatives' faint embarrassment and desire to change surnames to escape association. At least you can point and laugh at Corey Feldman's angelic to the core. Or if you're looking to commit suicide, Speeding Bullet to Heaven offers a particularly dire soundtrack. This, I don't even think you can laugh at or kill yourself effectively to it, because this is a record that's trying to have depth and meaningful swell about a sophomore struggle, and yet winds up a contradictory non-statement with no tonal consistency, writing that would get you laughed off Tumblr, and vocals that would embarrass your average screaming fetus. In other words, 1 out of 10. And unless Sam Hunt comes around with somehow break the space-time continuum by putting out a worse project, by far the worst album of the 2010s and that I've ever covered on this channel. Fuck this record. Fuck everyone at Warner Brothers who bankrolled this. Fuck the culture that enabled this and would excuse it. And if you inflict this on anybody, honestly, fuck you too. So yeah, this went longer than I expected. Yeah, if you guys want to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. AJR fans, I warned you ahead of time. Sorry, this album's garbage. I'm not gonna apologize for that either. The poll's up there for you to tell me how wrong I am, and the link's in the description if you want to buy it too. But really, don't buy this. Don't buy this album. It's awful. But yeah, if you guys want me to do anything to improve my presentation, I know my voice is kind of hoarse, as I said in a couple videos ago. I got a bit of a sore throat right now. Can't really get around that. If you guys want to support me and get records like this off of my schedule, link to my Patreon is right there. Where 3 times a week you guys get to vote on my schedule, and once a week you guys get to add records or even movies higher up on that schedule. Beyond that, I'm Mark. You're watching Spectrum Pulse. At least I hope you're still watching. And I'll see you next time.